as I'm looking forward here to actually getting a colleague in the 1st Congressional District to join our team, I was a little, I must admit, sort of a little taken aback. At first glance, I thought somebody had lifted our ad from 15 years ago in the 1st Congressional District. And although you notice, it's in the 3rd Congressional District. I'm concerned that at some point we're going into a period in the special election where there appears to be somebody who is confused about his own record, confused about his district, and I, for one, just hope that we can start off on a footing here where we're dealing with issues. Mr. Cornelis is looking very different than what we saw when he was running just a few months ago for the 1st Congressional District. Positions on health care for Medicare look very much like my friend Paul Ryan's, although he's backing away from that. His position on Social Security was very much like the privatization that we saw offered by President Bush, and somebody who at the time was embracing the Tea Party movement and now appearing to sort of back away from that. It's, I think, the use of what looks like my campaign ad. They say imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, but I am hopeful that Oregonians deserve more than flattery, and that to be able to deal with people in terms of what they believe, what they've done, and what they're going to do going forward.
Congressman, there are other candidates in other cities who've used sort of similar ads to this as well. I mean, what's wrong with using running as a metaphor? I mean, it's something that a lot of people in the area do.
It doesn't bother me running as a metaphor. I was struck that the special election, that it was virtually identical to what I had run before, right down to the suit, and being in the 3rd Congressional District. And it was just too rich symbolism not to at least call attention to, and hopefully that we'll have an opportunity for people to get back to the issues, and this is not going to be something that's going to obscure what people believe in or confuse about, you know, what district they're in.
Are you going to make an endorsement in the Democratic primary?
I'm at work to deal with an event after the primary. There are 3 people that are running who are all friends of mine, people I've worked with, and I'm going to and the ballots are already out, so we'll just let that work its way. I don't think that would serve any constructive purpose at this point, and it would be too late to make it effect anyway.
His district there's quite a big advantage for Democrats in terms of voter registration. Could it just be argued it's good politics and he's trying to appeal to maybe more people in the middle voters?
Well, I mean, he had a much different appeal when he ran last time. I guess I'm from that old school where it isn't finger to the wind. You know, I couldn't sell it last time this way, so I'm going to kind of reinvent myself, and I'm going to cloak either what I believe in or morph into something else. One thing in that line is, you know, not politics as usual. What I'm seeing from this guy is politics as usual. He ran one way, got kicked, now he's trying to reinvent himself. I think voters have a right to know what people actually believe in, because this is tough times in Washington, D.C. And to have, and it's legitimate if he's a Tea Party Republican, okay. If he's going to reinforce those messages, okay. But to be a Tea Party Republican a few weeks or months ago, and then all of a sudden now attempt to reinvent himself, I think is exactly what's wrong with the political process. People ought to know what they believe, they ought to stand up for what they believe, and they ought to be able to tell people what they believe.
He wouldn't be the first politician to reinvent himself, though.
he would not be the first politician to attempt to reinvent himself. I've been around this business long enough to know that those efforts at trying to disguise what you believe or to try and tailor it to what the polls say now seldom are successful, but it's not a foundation upon which to represent the interests of a diverse, changing, and important district. This part of what I get a little tired of is how it so often is about the political game, and you're seeing that now with people coming up with the issue du jour, the tax program du jour. People are morphing and modifying, and then of course you're going to watch a radical shift as soon as the primaries are over, and they're no longer appealing to Tea Party Republicans, but then they're going to try and speak to the American public. That is what is, to a significant extent, is fueling the frustration today. They think that politicians are just saying what people want them to say or what they have to say to get past a primary or to get on television this week or to say something outrageous so that it'll spark online contributions. This is tied up to the frustration that people feel. And I've been involved with Oregon politics back when I worked with people like Tom McCall and Mark Hatfield, who knew what they believed in, and even when it wasn't popular, they would work with Democrats, sometimes to their peril. But you knew where they stood, and it prompted that sort of interaction. And today, trying to be all things to all people is not constructive. And we've watched these things change. I was opposed to the war in Iraq. When I was opposed to the war in Iraq, that was not a popular position, even in the Portland area. But over the course of a couple years, it changed radically. I think it's important, particularly now when the respect for Congress is probably at an all-time low. I think it's important for people to try and make a contribution to be a part of the institution in a way that they can be constructive and in a way that isn't going to further erode public confidence. This is more serious than somebody trying to pivot for an election. This is about what the institution should be and what people should expect from politicians. And in the story.
Well, I have one more question from somebody else. Says the new KGW Oregonian poll has 38% of the 403 likely Democratic voters still undecided with the election less than 2 weeks away. Is that surprising to you?
No. In special elections, there tends to be a longer period of time before it really sinks in. There's so much there's so much going on now. I think on so many different fronts, internationally, nationally, locally, and the election process, having gone through this, where you have to try and explain to people that there's going to be 4 elections for the first. I mean, we finally gave up trying to explain it and just printed a button that said "Vote Earl, vote often," because I was going to be on 4 different ballots in less than a year. So I would think that this is not unexpected. I think it will be building. I think there will be more of a turnout when November 8th finally comes, and then likewise I anticipate there will be more attention and involvement. But that's why nobody should take these elections for granted. Strange things can happen in special elections, and it's an opportunity for people to get a head start on some of the big challenges of 2012.
Yes. I have one last question. I mean,
Sure.
Some people might look at this and say, he's not in your district, you've easily won every race you've ever been involved in. Why even worry about an ad he's running? I mean, what?
I find the process troubling. I mean, the optics are a little strange. But this whole notion of the reinvention, the staging, and not the serious issues that were being talked about a few months ago by the candidate in question. And I hope it doesn't portend to an election on January 31st, where most of the efforts are posed to disguise what the candidate stands for. And I think that would be unfortunate. I think it would be a disservice to the people of the 1st Congressional District. And I find it irritating.
If he's elected, can you work with him?
I have worked over my career with the widest variety of people imaginable. In fact, I go out of my way to work in a bipartisan fashion. I gave a personal letter to every one of the 87 Republicans, including many that were Tea Party Republicans, in terms of how they could get established in Congress. I worked very hard on bipartisan legislation, and I have throughout my career. I organized and led Democrats for Hatfield when he was behind in the polls, and my party was going to beat him with somebody who I didn't think was good for Oregon or the country. I am proud of a record of trying to work in a bipartisan fashion, but it doesn't help working in a bipartisan fashion if you're going to deal with somebody who doesn't know what he believes in or is trying to morph into something else. That makes it harder, not easier. I've put, for example, in farm reform, I've co-sponsored important legislation with Paul Ryan and Jeff Flake, who are amongst the most conservative you will find in Congress. But you know where they stand, and you can work with them. But if you have somebody who doesn't know where they stand and is always going to be fingered to the wind, and it's just about an election, then it's harder. But that's their problem as much as somebody else's, because you don't know what you're dealing with.
Can I get in a question about the suspicion provision? Can I get in a question about the suspicion provision? The bill that you co-sponsored with Jamie Herrera? I'm sorry. Never mind. The bill that contractors working with the U.S. government and not paying them so their tax to insure. I'm sorry, there was a New York Times article this morning.
The 3%?
Yes.
Okay, well that was my legislation with Wally Herger.
Oh.
There are 260 other people who signed on, but Wally and I crafted the legislation, moved it through Ways and Means, carried it on the floor.
I apologize.
No, it's fine. But I'm sure all over America there are now people who are claiming that it's their legislation that I helped them with, such is life. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it.
I was just going to ask. It seems like a small issue, but it's getting a lot of play for having gotten through Congress in a bipartisan fashion right now. What was the secret to that one?
Well, in part because it was a horrendous mistake. I voted against that bill in 2005, and this was just kind of dropped in and really didn't get the attention that it deserved. And we will celebrate anything we can, and Wally and I did get it through the Ways and Means Committee quickly. We had an overwhelming vote on the floor of the House. But it is something that never should have gotten to this point. You know, we fought to suspend it, but that is a testimony to some of the dysfunction in Congress. When this is raised to the level of a major accomplishment, this is something that I hope we could have done months before and get an agreement with the Senate to move forward with it. This bill actually would have cost the federal government more money than it would collect, with all the bookkeeping and whatnot. But we'll take it. We'll celebrate it. Now we'll try and work with the Senate to get it done. But I think it tells you more about the state of Congress, that somehow this is a banner issue, that it had to be this hard for something that never should have happened in the first place, and earlier in the game would have been relatively simple to fix. But that's not the state of affairs.
Thanks.
Yeah, no. I'm happy to help Jamie.